Hello, welcome to Stageworthy. I'm Phil Rickaby, the host and producer of this podcast. Stageworthy is Canada's theatre podcast. Every week, I talk to a Canadian theatre artist, some of whom you may know, and others I really think you should. I have another great guest for you this week, one that I really think you should know. But before I get to that guest, let's take care of a little bit of housekeeping. I want to talk first about my Patreon. I can't do this show without the backers who've chosen to be patrons of the Patreon. Because of my patrons, I'm able to cover some of the costs that are incurred of doing a podcast. You might not know this, but even though I give you this podcast for free, there are costs associated with producing the podcast. And my patrons help to make sure that I can cover those costs. But there's still more that needs to be done. Like I've said in the past, I'm not able to do transcripts for the podcast right now because the tools that are available and really affordable take so much work to clean up that it's not even worth really providing a transcript. And there are other tools that will provide excellent transcripts, but they're more expensive. And without more backers, without more people helping me to make this podcast, I won't be able to afford that. So for the time being, there are no transcripts for this podcast. And I think that's a shame because transcripts are not only great for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, they're great for people who might want to follow along with the conversation and just make searching the podcast easier. So if I get more backers for the Patreon, then maybe I can start to add transcripts back to the show again. If you would like to back this podcast, if you'd like to help me to make this podcast, you can do that by going to patreon.com/stageworthy. And it only costs $7 Canadian a month to become a patron of this podcast. Patrons get to hear episodes early. And also when there are issues that I want to discuss, I always turn to the Patreon and we will talk that out. If there are things that I'm thinking might be important, things that I want to know, then I go to the patrons. And the more patrons we get, the more I'll be able to add to the perks that patrons get in the future. Again, if you want to join the Patreon, go to patreon.com/stageworthy and become a patron. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you like this. I'd love to hear what you think about this podcast because we're going to get into some really nitty gritty meat in this podcast episode. And so if you really have some thoughts, please share them. Leave a comment, like this episode. And if you like watching Stageworthy, if you like seeing the interviews that I'm producing, click the subscribe button and hit that bell icon so that you will always get notified when a new episode is made available. And if you're listening to the audio version, you can leave a rating on this podcast. You can go to the Stageworthy website and leave a comment on this episode's page. That'll be at the top of the page if you're listening the week the episode comes out. I'd love to hear what you think of this episode. But if you are listening to the audio version, make sure that you're subscribed. If you go into your favorite podcast app, search for Stageworthy, and then click on the plus sign, the check mark sign, click subscribe or follow, whatever it might be in your particular podcast app. And then every time I release an episode, it will download directly to your device and you'll get a notification that it's there and you can listen right on your device without having to go searching for the episode. And that's enough housekeeping for now because I really want to get to my guest this week, who is Evan Bawtinheimer. Evan is now a Dora Award-winning bipolar playwright. He is the playwright of Paddy Picker, which won the Theatre for Young Audiences Playwriting Award at the Dora Awards this past year. And Evan and I have a whole lot to say both about how he came up with that play, what it was like putting that play on at Fringe, and then going on to have a run after that at the Assembly Theatre, what it was like assembling the team that created this show, and a lot of thoughts about the state of theater and playwriting in general. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. I had a lot of fun having the conversation. And so here is my conversation with Evan Bawtinheimer. Well, Evan Bawtinheimer, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you talking with me. After all, you are now, and you can call yourself a Dora Award-winning playwright for Paddy Picker, which was at the Toronto Fringe last year and also had a run at the Assembly Theatre shortly thereafter. How were you wrapping your head around the whole Dora Award-winning playwright thing?
You know, I It's an adjustment. It's a little awkward because all my colleagues are saying I have to now like promote it whenever I promote myself, saying like, Evan, you have to tell people you won the Dora. That way they'll work with you. And again, it's a little awkward, but I manage. I manage.
It's good. It's good. So I mean, that's those things. That looks like you could just like fit it in like a backpack, so you can wherever you go, you could just sort of like put that right on the table.
What I want to do is get a really big gold chain like Flava Flav, and instead of having the large clock, I just put the Dora on it. Oh, because like it's got the perfect hook right here. You could just do that. It's
They didn't used to though, because it used to be like the Harlequin character
yeah.
that they used to have. You can't put that on a chain.
You should not know.
not just you cannot, but you should not for sure. No, but in all seriousness, I'm sure that like having your name read at the ceremony was quite an experience. And do you have a reluctance, or do you have like any kind of discomfort with that title?
The title of my name?
No, Dora Award winning.
No, no, no. Well, it was actually in hindsight, I should have known that I had a good chance of winning the award as soon as they announced the nominees because they didn't stumble under my name. Normally, when you see Bawtinheimer the first time, you go, like you don't know how to say it. But they just went, Evan Bawtinheimer. And I'm like, oh no, they've read my name before. They practiced my name. Oh no.
You don't think that they practiced everybody's name before the ceremony to make sure they pronounce them right?
Well, there was one nominee from TFT that had like 15, 20 playwrights as part of the nominations. So I don't think they practice all their names. Plus, Bottenheimer is such an intimidating last name for some people.
Sure.
But in terms of saying I'm a Dora Award winner, it's new because I have a large collection of Canadian plays on my bookshelf right there. And a lot of them say, Dora Award winner from 2007, Dora Award winner from 2001, 2009. And to be part of that collection of playwrights, it's humbling beyond belief. I never would have expected it, at least not for my very first show, very first time around.
That is an incredible feat, to be honest. I don't know if it's your first play of you, but it's your first theater for young audiences play for certain. And to even be nominated for a Dora first time out the gate is pretty impressive.
I definitely consider it my first play, period. I've had a few stumbles like a decade, 12 years ago, but I took a lot of time to practice my craft, like writing in a dark corner in the room just to get a sense of my voice. And this is definitely the first play in my voice right now. So again, to have that be the nomination was huge. And especially the nomination for the cast that I worked with, the director and the production as a whole was remarkable. But the win was, I was in a daze for about like the next 48 hours going, I have no idea what's happening. And
I'm absolutely certain
it was a shock.
How do you even know what to say when you have to go? Had you planned what to say? Were you encouraged to write down?
My roommate encouraged me to take notes just in case I happened to win. And I wrote down 6 names and just thought I'd ad lib the rest. I wrote down my parents' names, my brother's name, our 2 performers, and our director, and just thought I would just talk about the play a little bit. But again, I never imagined it would actually happen. And I'm pretty sure when they announced Evan Bawtinheimer for Patty Picker, it was in slow motion. And my body kind of went like this, where I just like, oh no, I have to get up and accept the award. But it was fantastic because I knew a lot of people in the audience from other companies, other projects. So to have people that I knew in the audience support me was wonderful.
Since we're talking about the Dora award-winning play Patty Picker, tell us about what Patty Picker is.
Patty Picker is it's a play about a high school girl named Patty, and she's running to be grade 10 rep in her school until one day her arch nemesis blackmails her with an incriminating video of Patty picking her nose. And it goes viral over the school and it changes her entire world. And she has to learn how to overcome the embarrassment, but also how to forgive and forget. which I think in our current divisive world is harder than ever to actually let things go and show true forgiveness, especially for people who damage us in such an incredible way. And it's a play about love and tolerance and compassion.
So how did this play come about? A little while ago, you posted like a memory on Facebook, which was like a question that you were asking about theater for young audiences. And you sort of like, I think you said this is a timely reminder of how this play started. Where did the idea for the play start?
Well, I think like most playwrights, when they start and stop, start and stop. I'm gonna be a playwright, and then it becomes a little bit too challenging, so they quit, and then they start again, they quit, like that. Like with most artists in general. And after my 12th time of quitting and coming back, I said to myself, okay, what are some things I've never seen before on a stage? What are some things I've always wanted to do on stage? And I wrote down a list, and it's somewhere in my room, of about 40, 50 things that I would love to do. And one of them was the hero picks their nose. And I went with that one. And somewhere else on the list was I wanted to write my own version of The Goater Who is Sylvia, the Edward Albee play. And I took those two ideas, kind of merged them together, and found out I wanted to write a play about how the nose picking is not just about nose picking. It's about how we tolerate things that are incredibly different and how our levels of tolerance aren't as high as we think they are. I mean, we're tolerant of identity. We're tolerant of class. We're tolerant of so much. And yet there are still some things that make us go, ew, I don't want to associate with you. Like when I was pitching this play to prospective audience members to come see the show, the second I said, oh, and she picks her nose, a good number, like a couple dozen people went, ew, I don't want to see that. That's like, that's kind of the point. It's the fact that for as tolerant and enlightened as we think we are, there are still some things that we just won't cross that are even tiny insignificant things like picking your nose, which is funny because, and I was talking with my cast about this, during the course of the production of the Fringe run and the Assembly run, I said to them, like, haven't you noticed since we started the show, you just see people in the world picking their nose and no one seems to mind, but no one talks about it? And I guarantee you, Phil, in the next 48 hours, you're going to see someone on the streets or on a subway or on a bus, and they're just picking their nose like it's no problem. And yeah, it's something that's there, but we don't talk about.
I'm curious about, you said that one of the things you wanted you wrote down the hero picks her nose. Was that just a dichotomy for you of like, we don't think about the hero doing something like that. We don't think about the hero picking their nose. And that's something that jumped out at you?
No, I've come to learn with my own process that I have two elements. And once I have both of them combined, I can start writing the play. And that's the how and the why. And the how is typically a unique image or unique sound or something that is obtuse in some capacity or absurd. It just looks odd. And then the why is the reason. It's why am I doing this? What is the truth I want to convey? What is the purpose of this entire piece? And I knew the how was she picks her nose, but I couldn't figure out the why until I did. And then they both came together. So it's just a blank symbol till you infuse meaning in it. And once I found the meaning, the play just kind of stumbled together.
And as far as the writing process went, how long did it take you to write that first draft?
I outline like there's no tomorrow. I want to make sure that when I start writing the draft, I know about 3/4 of the way through and let the last quarter just sort of find itself. But I outline as much as I can. That way I have something to work with and play with as I'm writing the final draft or the first draft. So the outline probably took, I want to say 3 to 4 weeks. But the actual first draft, because the outline was so fleshed out and I knew the characters well, I knew the scenario well, I knew the world building well, it's up maybe 72 hours. And again, if anyone reads the scripts, the writing is very sparse. It's all left aligned to the page. And instead of writing a complete sentence, I may just write a word or 2 words that represent something larger. So instead of saying, and then Patty went to the girls' bathroom, it'll just say girls' bathroom. Keeping in mind, Patty Picker is one monologue interspersed with scenes. And so she's telling this as it's happening.
I find it, one of the things I love listening to process, because I think everybody has their own process. As a playwright myself, I pants it almost all the way through, at least for the first draft. I am a notorious, just like, I'm going to discover this. And then once I get to the end and I understand the play, I go back and I try to make it look like I meant to do that in the first place. I'm terrible at outlining because I don't know yet. Do you know what I mean?
Sort of. I think my outlining is my pantsing. So instead of pantsing out, for those who aren't aware of what the term pantsing means, it's like flying up the seat of your pants, just like letting it just go on a whim.
Yeah.
Compared to meticulously beating it out, scene by scene, line by line, act by act. You're flying up the seat of your pants, so they call it pantsing. And I think my outlining, where it's literally just, here's a sentence or 2 to represent a scene, and here's a paragraph that represents an act, is my version of pantsing. Because I can do whatever I want because it's only one sentence rather than dissecting a whole paragraph or 2 paragraphs or 5 pages.
Right. Yeah. Ooh, how does character develop throughout the writing process?
I develop my characters based on a type of moral argument where they represent certain sides of an argument. And in this case, Patty Picker's argument was about tolerance and acceptance. And there are some people who are not as acceptant of other people. Like Patty, when she starts, is very intolerant, but she doesn't realize it. She hates drama club, even though her girlfriend's in drama club. She hates her competition, even though it's another person in her world. She hates her dad for how the divorce went with her mother. And she's got a lot of pent-up anger she's not really expressing. And she relieves that anger through picking her nose. It's her anxiety relief system, as it were. And so you have different characters representing different moral viewpoints. It's funny because one of the more tolerant people out of the 4 is Preston, the bully character, because he says, even after he blackmails Patty with the video of her picking her nose, he'll say something like, I'm not doing this out of any like vendetta. I'm doing this because it's in my best interest to as your competition. It's not because you're a woman. It's not because you're gay. It's not because you're this, not because you're that. And like, he's surprisingly tolerant of her and her position, but just says it's to my advantage, so I have to take it. Whereas Patty's girlfriend, Phoebe, is supportive of Patty only so long as it suits her. Once it's revealed that once the video comes out and Patty's life is turned upside down, Phoebe leaves. Phoebe breaks off the whole thing because it's not convenient to her. And we'll only see her like in private meetings afterwards, so long as it's not public. And Phoebe's dad, who is the 4th character, knows about tolerance because of his relationship with his ex-wife, and knows that it's an easy thing. Tolerance is an easy thing to do, but it's also a hard thing to do because you have to get over whatever vendetta you have against the person. You have to think about the bigger picture rather than just the minute hatred you have against this person. And the fact is, and this is a lesson that I think adults can take as well as teenagers, if you just spend your life hating people, it's not going to do you any good. You have to forgive. You have to forget. You have to move on. You have to grow. And it takes a while for Patty to learn compassion and empathy, but she does.
Once you wrote through it, you got your first draft. At what point, like, how many revisions did you revise? A lot? how I end up revising a lot just because of my writing process. Was it very clear first draft, or how much revision did you have to do?
The final draft was about 45 pages, and the first draft would have been about 40. I know for my technique, I tend to underwrite. That way, when I get into the room to rehearse, there's room to make things larger rather than cut something. The final draft was almost the same as the first draft, apart from a few cosmetic cuts. The only difference is the pre-climactic moment with Patty and her father as they talk about tolerance in the world. Originally, it was literally one paragraph. And the more I spoke to our director, the more I spoke to our director, and the more the director worked with the cast, the more we realized, like, that's the beating heart of this entire play. You have to flesh it out. And so that one paragraph became like 7 pages of an actual scene rather than just a tiny, tiny monologue. I think I was trying to rush through at the beginning just to get to the main meat of the argument. And it's like, no. Here's where the heart of everything is in this conversation. You have to flesh it out. And then once that came through, the play changed overnight and became something much more deep than what it could have been.
Now, by director, we're speaking about the incredible Cass Van Wyck. And Cass, like, I've seen so much of Cass' work this year at Fringe and in the past. How did Cass come to this project, and how did you put the whole team together for this production?
I applied to the Fringe under the teens section. The Toronto Fringe has a kids section, but I believe in 2024 they had a teens section where if the play was either produced starring teens or the target audience was teens, you could apply for it. And since Patty Picker is really meant for high school kids, it was a perfect fit. I got into the Fringe. I had the scripts, and I was looking for a director to work with. And I had seen Cass Van Wyck's work in Bone Cage over at the Assembly a few months prior. And after I saw that piece, I went, I have to work with her in some capacity. Keeping in mind, Cass Van Wyck, Caitlin Race, and myself all went to the same university, all went to the same program. They were 1 year ahead of me, but we sort of were in each other's orbit. So Cass already knew who I was. I already knew who she was, and Caitlin. So getting together with Cass, I said, look, here's the script, here's the pitch. At the time, I said it was like, it's pretty much done. It could use a couple edits, but the form is still solid. And she got back to me a few days later saying, I think there's something to this. And she accepted. And she had worked with Caitlin on Bone Cage. She'd worked with Anne Van Leeuwen, our other performer, who plays 3 roles in this piece, which is stunning how she did it. They were both phenomenal. And we had a table read, and I think Cass and I both knew right away that Caitlin was it. She had the voice down. She had the character pretty much down after like reading it just once. We knew.
One thing that I will comment on about you mentioned Anne playing 3 characters. And one thing that I noted in looking at play is right at the beginning, there's some very quick changes in character.
Yep.
And that takes a lot of talent, a lot of definition, and a lot of deft skill to change characters that quickly. So you needed somebody with the talent of Anne to be able to pull that off.
Well, I wasn't in the room for most of the rehearsal process. I was working full time at the time, and our schedules didn't work together. So I had to trust Cass, Caitlin, and Anne on the rehearsal process. So I don't know whose idea it was to make each character have a specific prop to signify who they were at the time. Because Anne plays Phoebe, the girlfriend, Preston, the antagonist, and Pete, the father. And the father has like a baseball cap, and Preston has his little emotional support dog, and Phoebe has like these little cat ears, like a headband. And they were placed on a coat rack at the back of the stage, visible to the audience. So in between scenes, she would just take one off, put one on, like literally changing hats. And again, I don't know whose idea it was, but it was absolutely seamless what they did, especially because the opening of the show is set to an overture from Marriage of Figaro, where it's a movement piece between Patty and each of the characters, kind of representing what's going to happen in the play later on, which I totally stole from Mission Impossible. Like, the opening credits, they have like scenes from we totally stole that. No shame. And it worked so beautifully.
That's very brilliant to take that from Mission Impossible. Because I will bet, because of the context, most people didn't think, oh, that's from Mission Impossible.
Oh no, how good that.
Now, after doing this show at Fringe, it went on to be part of the assembly season.
Mm.
How quickly after Fringe did the group sort of say, we need to do this again?
I believe it was the second to last show. Cass came up to me and said, like, we have to do this again. We absolutely have to, because they want to be able to promote it on their own terms, get it to a space that they know. Plus, at that time, the reviews for the show, there was maybe 8 or 10 critics that came by to review us, and it was A+, 5 stars around the board. We were best of Fringe. We made the front page of the Toronto Stars Entertainment section, and we're sitting here going, like, people absolutely loved this show. Let's try and produce it outside of Fringe and see what happens. Try and get more young adults into the audience to see the show, because there is an unimplied bias when it comes to kids' Fringe, no matter how outstanding the show is. And I'm not saying myself for this example, I'm saying the other kids' shows that I've seen in the past. No matter how outstanding the show is, you're playing to like third houses, half houses, because audiences will see kids' show and think that's for kids, it's not for adults. It's not for me, it's only meant for 10-year-olds and 13-year-olds. And we wanted to try and break through that barrier and put it up on our own terms. And it worked a lot better than we thought it would.
Wait, at Assembly, were audiences a mix of like the 10 to teen audience and an adult audience? How did that work out in the performance of it?
It was an 8 or 9 show run, and I was there for about 6 of them. And when I was there, the houses were pretty full, and there was a mix of young adults and adults, which I completely owe to Cass Van Wyck. Her producing skills to get young adults to come see the show was remarkable. If you'd have spoken to me 10 years ago and said, like, what's the most important part of a show? I would have told you arrogantly the playwright. It's the playwright first. You can't do the show without a script, blah, blah, blah. And I would have staunchly defended that to the death. And the older I get, the more I work with other people, the more I realize, while the script is important, it is one element of a much bigger machine. And Cass, Caitlin, and Anne are capable of things I could never do. And if you ask me now, I would just say, like, you just need good people and you'll find a way. And Cass, Caitlin, and Anne are some of the best people I know.
Now I want to sort of go back a little bit. I want to talk a little bit more about you as a playwright. You sort of talked about moving from, like, started to write and then quitting, and then started writing and quitting. But let's talk a little bit broader and tell me about what's your theater origin story? How did you first get interested in theater?
Well, I didn't grow up with a theater household. My parents never really took me to go see plays or musicals or operas or ballets or anything like that. We weren't a very artistically centered family, but I was a very rambunctious, energetic youth. And when it came to high school, I was able to funnel that through my drama classes. Keeping in mind, at the time, in high school, I was an undiagnosed bipolar. I am bipolar. And it should have been a very clear sign that I was bipolar, especially with how I behaved. But people thought, oh, he's just energetic. He's dramatic. He He's got a lot of enthusiasm. It's like, no, that's mania. That's mania what's happening. And it's like, no, but he's a good actor. Like, he can project. He's not enthusiastic. Like, he can do all this fantastic stuff. Like, no, that's Evan being insane. So I went through 4 years of drama, high school drama classes. And when it came time to graduate, they said, what's, your best grade is what you should pursue. And so I said, well, I'm getting 90s in drama, so let's go for drama. And I was accepted at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario. And one of the reasons why I went there was because I wanted to be as far away from the GTA as possible for the first time. So London was a pretty good bet. But also, and I recommend this to anyone who's starting out after high school. If you're thinking of going into theater, go to college first, because they put you in there on a practical level. You're actually doing things. Whereas university, in my experience, was more theoretical.
Yeah.
You're learning the concepts, you're learning the history, and you're writing more essays. But if you just want to sit there and act, college is where you want to go. And if you want to pursue your education further, then go to university and get your bachelor's. And then if you want to pursue further, get your MA and PhD and all that. That's kind of where my history was. I went to college first, did a lot of acting, took a year off and said, you know what, I still want to learn more. So I went to Brock University for performance with our mutual friend, Jess Gorman, and learned more about theater as a practice and the history of it and the importance of it than ever before. I was actually particularly lucky because of how the college credits transferred over to university. I was able to finish a 4-year program in 2.5 years. So I would have an entire university year with like 4 classes for the whole year. So I read probably every play I could get my hands on in the library, to the point where I was reading like 3 to 4 plays a week, just to like absorb as much knowledge as possible. But I still consider myself a performer. I was in the performance concentration. I was doing the main stages. I was in the acting classes. But by the end but before graduation, I realized something. I didn't have the same passion that actors do. And you can tell right away when an actor is an actor because of how they talk about the work. Like we would see a show at Stratford with my acting class, and they would talk about, oh, did you see this, this person, that person, this person, that person. And I would be the one coming out of the play going, did you hear that text? Did you hear that monologue? It was fantastic. Like the alliteration, the plot structure, like how it was formatted. And then they sort of told me, like, I think you're a playwright. And yeah, that was kind of my educational background, where I started out trained as an actor, but left as a playwright.
Were you when they were coming to you saying, we think you're a playwright, were you resistant to that? Or had you reached the point where you were like, yeah, I think you might be right?
I kind of accepted it because, again, I wasn't watching, 5 movies a week just to get a sense of acting style. I was reading plays nonstop to get a better sense of how a play is written.
Reading plays is not only necessary for actors, for playwrights, but it also, the more plays you read, the more you learn how to read them. I remember years ago when the theatrical adaptation of the Magical School series that will not be named came out, it was being advertised all over the place. Posters for it on subways, buy it Indigo and things like that, as though it was a novel. And people rushing out to get it as though it was a novel. And then suddenly being so disappointed because they didn't know how to read this thing. Because if you can't just pick up a play for the first time and understand what it all means.
Yep.
That's a skill that has to be developed over time to be able to visualize what stage directions mean and what does all of this do? How might this be put onto the stage? And it did that play a disservice by treating it like a novel, but it also, I think, is a lesson about the difference between reading a play and reading a novel.
the one thing I would say about that, to go along with that, is that there's structure. I believe all plays should have some semblance of structure and some capacity. And while the formatting of a novel and the formatting of a short story and the formatting of a screenplay and the formatting of a stage play all look different, they can still have the same structure. And I am such an advocate for structure in a play. I am obsessed with information in a play and how information is given to an audience member or given to a reader over time. And if you have the right structure, you can do that in such amazing ways. Like, think of how Pinter's Betrayal or Colleen Murphy's The December Man are told literally backwards, but the information is so solid you can follow it. And that's, to me, that's what plays are. They're just information, be it expositional information or character information, emotional information. But that's all it is. And once you can inform your audience as you see fit, and withhold information as well, because that's part of telling the story. That's part of telling the story, yeah.
One of the things that I find fascinating about sharing information is how easy it is to do it clumsily. As you were talking about sharing information and exposition, I could not help but think of the ill-fated Green Lantern movie from many years ago, where it's nearly unwatchable because everything that people say is entirely exposition. There is no there's almost no character building because everything that people say is information. They're basically telling, not showing. And it's a very clumsy script. And as soon as you start to see it happening, you can't help but shift uncomfortably and like, I'm not enjoying this because it's just stiff and here's everything. I'm just going to blah. Here's the exposition. And there's so many more clever ways or better ways to share information. As you're reading plays, as you're sort of like experimenting with that and sort of seeing structure, do you have ways that you're able to sort of keep yourself from like falling into a exposition hole?
Hearing what you're saying, I have two thoughts. And I guess they're more questions. When it comes to a story, let's say for plays, when it comes to a play, would you rather have too much information or not enough information? And I've come to the opinion, I would rather have too much, because at least I know something rather than know nothing. And if something happens on stage without any context, without any information behind it, without any meaning behind it, it becomes meaningless. But if you provide me with at least something to grasp onto, even if it's too much, I have something to grasp onto and I can follow it. So to go back to your Green Lantern example, sure, it's a lot of exposition and it is heavy with it and it's a lot of telling. At least they're giving you something and not just showing you a bunch of random nonsense. To go for another example of a superhero movie, it's to date this podcast. I just saw the Superman movie a few weeks ago, and that was a lot of showing and not telling, where it's just like, we're going to just put you in the middle of it, no context, no backstory. We're just going to show you a bunch of stuff and assume you have the knowledge to follow the story. And I'm watching this movie going, I cannot emotionally connect to any of this because you're not telling me a story. You're just presenting me random scenes. And when it comes to my own information, I would rather tell too much than tell too little.
Yeah.
But also, in terms of show, don't tell, I find that piece of advice not wrong, but not universal. I believe there are some things you have to tell. Just off the top of my head, with most of Shakespeare's scenes, they all end with, I'm not a big Shakespeare guy, but most of them end with a line or a couplet that summarizes what you just heard. The play is the thing with which I'll capture the conscience of the king. That's telling. But we've seen it through showing of the scene. But he summarizes what we just saw through a line. So sometimes you need to tell. Sometimes you need that one line of dialogue that helps the audience get to the next scene. I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence. Sometimes you need that line.
Yes. Yeah.
All the next act of the play.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not saying, I think it's the balance between the two, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not a universal where you have to only show and not tell, and you can't only tell and not show.
Yeah.
You have to do a bit of both.
There's a certain amount of, I've told this story before, but years ago I did a production of, I worked with a company called Keystone Theater. We did plays in the style of silent film. You can't tell a lot, so you can only show. And you could do as much as you can to try to give people motivations and find out, so people know who the characters are, but they can only really get a sense of who the characters are.
Yep.
And one of the things that we found fascinating with that process was that an audience would connect enough with the action that they would just fill in the spaces in the story. They would understand what was happening, and they would fill in these stories, what might be happening. Because again, we can't do like subtext. We can only do surface. And so we would have people tell us about the show and what they thought was happening after it. And sometimes it would be different from what we intended. And early on in our performance of it, we would be like, no, that's not what happened. And then eventually we just got to this point where we're like, no, I want to hear what your experience of this was, which was a fascinating lesson in letting go of the play. Because again, it's an interesting experiment in like, we can only show you, and everything that happens has to be based in a character and a character's motivation, and then it will work. But if it's not, then you lose everything.
Yep. Well, even to go with your example, if the audience doesn't know what motivates the character, they won't get the subtext.
Right. Yeah.
You have to give your audience some information and withhold other bits of information in order for a story to work. If you just give them all information, that's news. But if you give them part information and then a bit of description and then the other half of information, that's suspense, that's storytelling. I took a directing class in university and I picked up a lot of good tidbits from it. But the one thing I've always remembered was that the average person can only withhold 8 pieces of information at a time. So if you try to bombard them with 10 pieces, they're only going to remember 8 and they won't remember the last 2. And so it's your job as a director to keep things very simple. And it's my job as a playwright to keep the information memorable, slow, and not bombarding with tons of pieces of information at once. Because again, the average person can only withstand so much information at once. It's the difference between reading 8 words in a line or 8 words stacked up upon each other. You have to see each beat clearly.
Yeah, that's certainly. I mean, you have to keep in mind what audiences can deal with, and also I think it explains why sometimes you'll hear about storylines being dropped from a play or being dropped from a comic book or a novel or a film because it complicated the story too much. It's a thing that sometimes has to happen. Is you have to drop something that you really like, but because it's already too much information. I would like to ask you, we sort of, before we started rolling, we sort of talked about, I almost said day job. It's not a day job, your night job. One of the things that is always interesting in this industry is how people balance their work life and their creative life. So I'm curious about how you manage to find that balance in your life between the time that you spend at work and then still having time to be creative.
It's a challenge, especially because my particular job keeps me busy for anywhere between 8 to 12 hour shifts, 5 to 6 days a week. And the only thing that really comes to mind is the fact that from my desk in my office to my front door is about 45 minutes. and I take a subway going north and a subway going east. And on that subway ride, I daydream. I make notes. I outline. Most of Paddy Picker was done on my phone in terms of the outlining. The actual dialogue I did on a Word doc, but the outlining was done on a large notes app where it lets me sit down in a quiet space, or as quiet as a TTC subway train is, and just focus on this piece. Because I'm away from my home, and I feel like when I'm out, I'm doing something. And when I'm at home, it's not the same. When I do get at home, I'm listening to podcasts on storytelling all the time. The frustrating thing is, I've been searching for YouTube channels for playwriting, specifically for the act and craft of playwriting. And apart from the occasional blog piece, there's no content creators that do that. And yet, if you want to talk screenplays, you want to talk novels, you want to talk short stories, I could give you a dozen of each that talk about the formatting styles of a screenplay and the and the story structure of a book. And eventually it got to a point where my ability to write a play has been informed by my knowledge on how to write a book. And I take those two lessons and blend them together. So I'm constantly listening to podcasts on how to write a screenplay, how to write a novel, how to write a short story, how to write a poem, because there aren't any content creators out there talking about playwriting. There's very little that talks about the act of playwriting and not just performance or directing or design. So I'm always thinking about how to tell a story, how a story looks like.
I think I think it says a lot about where theater sits in the consciousness of our society. But also, we're talking about, people think of theater and they think, often they think musicals, they think big Broadway musicals. They don't think about the craft of playwriting. And especially in North America, we don't have revered playwrights in the same way that some are in England and things like that. Or there might be a few, but I can't think of any modern ones really. It's one of those, again, I don't know if it's gatekeeping. Like, are the people who are knowledgeable in the playwriting process, are they keeping their knowledge because they're teaching a class? Or, like, I wonder what's happening there.
I have a theory. Whenever I work on a new project, I reread about 4 or 5 playwriting guides just to reteach myself how to write a play. That way, when I get to my 20th play, I'll have done the cycle over and over again, and it becomes more fluid and more natural. And I was reading a book on playwriting, which I won't name, and it was incredibly vague, even though it was a well-known book on playwriting that basically went, well, in the beginning, you introduce the world, introduce the characters. In the middle, you do the middle stuff. And in the end, you close it. End of thought. And I'm like, no, that can't be it. That can't be it. And yet, when you go to how people write novels, how people write screenplays, they talk about beats. They talk about what could happen here, what should happen here. And I think it's because a lot of people think theater is this amorphous, malleable lump of gas that can be anything, that can do anything. And while I believe that, I still believe that humans are hardwired for story. We know what a story is naturally. We tell stories every day, even if it's how was the weather today, or how'd you get to work, or how was your day? We tell stories consistently. We know naturally what a story looks like. So when I read a playwriting guide saying, the beginning is where you begin, the middle is where you middle, and the end is where you end, and yet I can read The Anatomy of Story by John Truby or Story by Robert McKee, and they give you no, here's what an inciting incident is. Here's what the individual crises looks like. Here's what they give you more detail. They're more refined to it. People think that you can just write a play. And I think that's why there's no creators talking about it. Because it's just, well, just write it.
It may also come from the fact that theater itself is a collaborative process. And so instead of thinking, oh, we'll fix it in post, I think maybe people think, oh, we'll fix it in rehearsal or something like that, which is not particularly helpful.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
So of course, I'm confused.
I've been in preparation for this interview, I read a couple of plays with the intention to talk about like what I thought about them. And I messaged you a while ago about this, and I want to talk about this for a quick second. Okay, first off, would you say you're playwright, actor, both? Like, what would you say you identify as?
I describe myself as a writer and performer.
Okay. And would you say you practice your craft consistently, always learning how to be a better performer, better writer, and you're always working on it?
Yes.
These are trick questions. Would you say the more you develop your craft and the more you learn about performance, that affects your enjoyment of other performances?
Absolutely.
Okay, I guess my point is, I'm not by any means an actor, but I'd like to imagine there are professional actors out there who have been working for 15, 20 years, film, stage, television, all this stuff. They take workshops and classes. They've done their training. They've put in their dues. And they'll go to see a show, and the acting is just not very good. For lack of a better term, it's not very good. And it affects their enjoyment of the show. And I've noticed, at least for myself, over the past few years, the more I learn about how to tell a story, the more I don't enjoy a lot of modern work because they don't know how to tell a story. Have you noticed that yourself?
I was actually having this conversation with my girlfriend just a little while ago because we have very different experiences seeing plays. Because she will leave a play and she will have liked it and she'll enjoy it. And I leave a play and and very frequently, I am very judgmental. Okay. I have these nitpicks and she pointed it out that as a person who is both a performer and a writer, I'm looking at these performances in that way. Like I've seen them in a more critical way. And does it affect my enjoyment? Yes. But every so often there's a play that is just so good and no notes.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I feel like I've transcended,
Oh, yeah.
and so it is absolutely worth it.
I find that too, although I'm finding that transcendent moment harder to come by. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm not by any means a pretentious snob that says, oh, you didn't put this here, that there, so therefore you get an F. I'm very accepting of people at the certain levels of their career. Like if this is your first play and you're at a fringe show and you write a one-person show, I'm not going to boo you. I'm not going to pan you because like you're learning. I was learning too. We all have our growing pains, blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't know. I read a play that was, and I'm not going to name it, but it was incredibly successful within the last 5 years in Canada. And I'm watching it go, I'm reading it going, I don't understand any of this. And I'm not sure how this thing got published. And I dreaded reading it a second time. I did to see if I was wrong. I'm like, no, it's the tone is strange. The characterizations are strange. It's meandering. It's just plain weird in a bad way. How did it get produced at X, Y, and Z? And I'm curious, like, what do we do with this knowledge that we have without it completely ruining our experience in theater?
I will tell you exactly what I do when I'm sitting in a theater and I am shifting in my seat, and I'm like, there's the voice in the back of my head that goes, I hate everything that I'm seeing right now. And what I have to do, and what I end up doing, is I think, why? What isn't working? What's missing from this? Why? And I have to get analytical. And I use that as sort of like a lesson in how to be able to, instead of just like sitting there and hating everything that's on stage or being uncomfortable or whatever the emotion might be, I end up trying to identify, why isn't this working for me? And how could I avoid that in the future? I'm going to tell you one of my pet peeves in theater, and it happens all the time, and it kind of drives me crazy, is a play is progressing, and then you get to the end and the lights go down and nobody knows that it's over. And the actors come out for their bows, and then the audience suddenly realizes that the play is over. And to me, that always is like, okay, you didn't figure out how to resolve the story to a point where the audience knows when those lights goes down, oh, this is over. And it happens a lot. And I think it's one of those things that we really need to fix in the theater, because the audience should never not know that the play is over.
It's like, you didn't end your play, you stopped your play.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
We just ran out of time.
Sorry, Matt Damon,
It's the Matt Damon of theater.
Slightly off topic, but still on topic. In a 1 hour, 1 act, how long do you give the play before you give up mentally? For me, it's about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing.
Like, my percentage is 15%. So if it's a 2 hour play, 15% is, oh crap. Why did I do this to myself? 25 minutes or something like that. If it's not working 25 minutes, I'm out.
I would say what I need in a play is I need something right off the top to catch my attention.
Yep.
Right? I need a hook right at the beginning. And if you don't give me that, now I'm struggling for like, what's going on? Who are these people? Why do I care? Why do I care? But that's the big one. Like, why do I, as the audience, care about this? And I only have a finite amount of time with that before I think you didn't care enough to do these things as a creative team, as a playwright. Like, I need the hook at the beginning.
Yep.
And I need to know who the people are. And without it, I'm just lost.
Yeah. I go to the theater. Okay, this is therapy now.
All right.
As a bipolar person, my empathy levels are lower than the average person. It takes a lot for me to care about things that the average person cares about naturally. That being said, when I go to the theater, I'm actively trying to empathize with what I see on stage, because I know it's very easy for me to slip into just apathy and not give a damn. I go to the theater because I want to feel something. Anything. I'm begging you. And keeping in mind, boredom is not a feeling. Boredom is a state of mind. I want to feel fear. I want to feel excitement. I want to feel change. Like, originally, my point of view was always, when I go to see a show, I want my life to change. And then it gradually evolved, because I think that was a little too high of a expectation. It evolved into, I want my mood to change. I want to be somewhat different from 1 hour ago when I sat in my seat. And I find not all shows, but a good number of shows, they're just not doing that anymore. Like, have you ever just seen a show and it just washes over you? Like, I was watching a podcast on books, and they're talking about this ancient text. I'm going to butcher the name, but like, it's the Navarretiets or something like that. And they describe the 3 purposes for storytelling, which I never considered, but I can't get it out of my head. The 3 purposes are to entertain, to educate, and to experience. As a writer, I can't do it purely to entertain. It's not within me. I could never do a light comedy. I could never do a nonsensical farce with running around and doors opening and costume changing and things like that. I could never do that. I need some kind of moral education or expression of self in what I write. Otherwise, it means nothing to me. If I'm going to devote a year, 2 years, 3 years of my life to this one play, I want it to do something.
Yeah.
Or at least have an opinion and not just be people running around being jerks.
You know, here's the thing about that is I don't mind writing a farce, something that seems light at the start, but I need it to change at the end. I need all of that lightness to have a meaning in it. It was for a reason, right? And so I like to pull the rug out, like, oh, I'm here for this farce, and then at the end, there's like that. All of that stuff happened to get us to this point, which is the serious moment. And in that way, I feel like I tricked you with entertainment.
Exactly. Like the 3 purposes of storytelling: education, experience, and entertainment. You're not supposed to do just one.
No,
Supposed to do 2 to 3, or if possible, 3 to 3. And take Patty Pecker, for instance. I believe it has bouts of entertainment because of how the fast pace roller coasterness of itself and how it goes from bit to bit to bit, and watching Anne play 3 characters and the expressive monologues and the wordplay and the alliteration is fun. And the education is the moral lesson on tolerance, and the experience is that one-on-one closeness you get with Patty as she tells you directly what her thoughts are, what she's feeling, and it makes it a very internal sensation. But again, I could never do something that's just, like you said, running around without any kind of a grand change, with any kind of grand purpose. Keeping in mind, I have friends who say that, again, I have high standards. Like, no, one of my favorite movies is Shrek. But the thing is, and if you ever read the screenplay for Shrek and watch the movie, it is one of the most perfectly structured screenplays of like the 21st century. And it does have entertainment, education, and experience. No, I just love that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting because I personally think that if you don't entertain, why is the audience coming there? Right? This is my opinion, and I know that in some circles one of these, like, if we're saying you need 2 out of the 3 at least.
Yeah.
If you don't entertain, why did the audience come?
I think it would depend on how you define entertain.
Sure, yeah.
Is your idea of entertaining like circus style rambunctiousness of jumping around and juggling and fire breathing, or is the act of performance entertainment?
Well, this is the thing: is entertainment can be subjective, right?
Exactly.
I think the idea to me is that there has to be something that brings the audience to that theater.
Yep.
And it is unlikely to be the education portion. It might be, but for the most part, when the average person goes to see a show, there's something that they've been presented with as something that makes them want to see that show.
Yeah.
And it is likely something that is about the entertainment factor of that show.
Yeah, and I agree to that. Although, at least for my own writing, I think the entertainment comes not from the actions, but from the content.
Sure, yeah.
Where it's that I'm not going to entertain you by, again, like having them do somersaults and wacky nonsense. It's not within my... I'm not a goofy playwright. I'm not necessarily a funny playwright. But I will have the entertainment of the moral argument, which I think can be fascinating, can be engaging.
Absolutely.
And
it's that thing off the top. It's the hook, right? It's the hook that you need to be able to draw you in so that you can stick with the play to its resolution.
Exactly.
And so, like, entertainment, I think sometimes in some circles we get caught up on entertainment as if it is, like you say, circus clowns and somersaults and all that sort of thing. But entertainment is a much wider thing, and the idea, and it's because people think, oh, was when you say that the theater should entertain, some people are like, what? I should bring in clowns, and it's so much more. It means so much more than that. Now, I mean, here we're sort of we're drawing to a close, but I don't feel like we're there yet because we've had this conversation that about theater and the nature of theater and the nature of playwriting. And I'll turn the question around to you that you asked me earlier, which is, when you are in a theater and you're watching something and it isn't working, what do you do?
I have only walked out of a play once, and that was not because of the play. It was because I walked out, went to the lobby, and then vomited. Not because of the play, but because I was sick. I have never walked into a play. I don't know if I ever will. Only because I made this my day. It's not just that I'm there for the hours that, no, I set time aside. I canceled other plans or didn't make other plans. And I went to the theater to watch your show. If it's bad, I know that it's hard for me to listen to it because, again, I have no clue what's going on. It's one thing for a show to be boring but understandable. It's another thing for it to be confusing. It goes back to our original, or whatever the topics we talked about before. Would you rather have too much information or not enough information? If I have too much information, that's fine. I can still follow something, even though I may miss a couple bits here and there. I'm thinking of a show that this relates to, where it's that it wasn't told properly and it wasn't set up properly. And because of that, the whole show was hard to follow. And I'm sitting there in the back getting not dizzy, but just it's confusing. Because, again, I'm actively trying to engage with what I see happening on stage, and I cannot follow you. And you're not making any attempt to bring me into your world. I guess the short answer is I wouldn't abandon the show, but I would be very wary about any future shows that you or your company may present.
Yeah, I know what you mean about not walking out of a show. I've never walked out of a show.
No.
I have ditched an intermission,
That's fair.
but that's rare, because I respect. I know how much work we know how much work goes into these things.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy, but I have too much respect for the people on stage to like get up and walk out.
Yep.
So that's why I choose to make it an intellectual exercise if something isn't working for me.
Like you say to yourself, how would I fix this? How would I
Yeah.
rewrite this? How would I edit this? How would I dramaturg this?
Yes. Yeah.
You always learn more from what doesn't work than from what does work, because it's one thing to say, oh, let's read Hamlet and learn all the good things about it. Like, well, no, how about we read this work in progress and talk about the things that aren't working so we can notice the problems in our own work, rather than just like notice all the good things in a good play.
As we're drawing to a close, I'll ask the dreaded question that people ask playwrights all the time.
Oh, no.
Is, are you working on something right now that you can talk about? And if the answer is no, that's an acceptable answer.
No, yes. One of the great things about how I work is that it's very difficult to steal from me, even if I told you what I was doing, because earlier on in the conversation, I talked about how there's the how and there's the why, and you blend them together to make a new idea. So if I came up to you and said, I'm writing a play about nose-picking intolerance, go. Like, you couldn't steal that idea from me because it wouldn't make any sense to you. So like right now I'm working on a play about roller coasters and apathy. My goal is to make Canada's most depressing play. I've got a play about body odor and freedom of speech, and I'm tinkering with a musical. I haven't found the right hook yet, but it's about the gender pocket gap, where like, you know, men have pockets, but women seldom do, and their pockets are decorative and that. Yeah, I like that idea. But again, I just find a lot of strange, it's either an image you've never seen before with an idea that you do know, so it becomes new, or an image you do know, but an idea you've never thought of, and then that idea becomes new.
I think it's interesting that, like, I think generally, for most people, it like we could share like the two things that we're working on. Like I can tell you about the play that I'm working on, about two actors, longtime marriage, and they've just divorced right as they're about to start doing a production of Taming of the Shrew. And the version of that you would write would be completely different from the version of it that I would write. Just like you could you give me the themes of how you pick her, and what I will produce is different from what you will produce. Because every playwright has a different point of view and a different outlook and different way of working. So even though we might start with the same theme, we're going to produce something entirely different.
Exactly. Was that the play that you brought to sing to your supper?
Yes.
I still remember that play. It was really good. Or that scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still working on it. I need to find the right ending for it. But it has an ending. There's just some stuff in the middle that I'm sort of like, again, I write it and then I make it look like I meant to do it in the first place.
You're a pantser.
That's exactly right. Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. And again, congratulations on being a Dora Award winning playwright.
Thank you, Phil. Longtime listener. I highly recommend anyone in the theater to come by and talk to you. Glad you're back. Good Lord, glad you're back. And I hope to be on again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Come back anytime.